Hello all, this is Michelle Sleever and I am introducing you to the lesson plan format for TCH 209. So what I'd like for you to do is to go to the wiki page and click on the resources and materials, and once you're on that page scroll down to the PBA teaching cycle and click on the lesson plan template. Once you've done that, open up the lesson plan template. And I'm going to walk you through the different parts to the lesson plan that you will be using for every tutoring session this semester. Of course, you're going to list your student's name. Please just list your student's initials, the date of the lesson plan. If it's one-on-one, you might have 2 students, so it might be small group, the grade level, and then the time frame of your tutoring. Moving to the first section is the purpose and major lesson goals. In this section is where you are going to be explaining the goals that you've set for your student that you're addressing in this particular lesson. For example, you might state that you are addressing sequencing in your reading goal 1 and perhaps also sequencing in your writing goal 2, for example, and then any of the other language arts that you might also be addressing. Moving down to the next section of the lesson plan is the learning outcomes and objectives. This is where you're going to be stating what the objectives are for your lesson, what you expect the student to learn. And I have a couple of examples here for you, but basically you're saying as a result of this lesson, the student will be able to, and I want you to have at least 2 objectives, if not 3, because I'm assuming you are addressing both reading and writing in your lesson plans, and of course the other language arts are fitting in there as well. As soon as you have stated your objectives, you are certainly welcome to use the Common Core standards to help you in formulating your objectives, but obviously you're looking at your own goals for your student to set your objectives. But after each objective, you are linking it to the Common Core standard that it best goes with, and you are certainly welcome to write the code for the Common Core standard as opposed to writing out the entire standard. Moving on to the next section of the lesson plan is the motivation section, where you are getting the student excited about the lesson. So perhaps you show the student a short YouTube video clip, or you perhaps share with them what their final product would be of the lesson, but it's something that is a little extraordinary that gets them really excited about what they're going to be doing. You of course are giving them the overview of your agenda for that day. Then moving on to the instructional plans, the instructional strategies or the plans. This is where you are stating in a list format, either bulleted or numbered, what the steps are of the lesson plan for that day. I would like for you to be as detailed as possible. I don't want to accept step 1, read book, step 2, have student fill out graphic organizer, step 3, wrap up lesson. That is way too vague. I would like it to be much more detailed than that, but I would like it to be in list form. It's easy to follow that way for you and for anyone that would substitute for your lesson. Reading a narrative would be too difficult. So list all of the steps that you plan to take during the lesson. Then once you have gone through those steps, you're going to move on to the next section, which is the ongoing informal assessment. Please pay attention to the fact that this is an informal assessment. I'm not expecting you to have the student fill out a worksheet or a quiz or a test. This is informal. You using your kid watching skills, or perhaps if you're introducing them to a strategy that you've scaffolded with a graphic organizer, that you've modeled it for them in the I do portion of the lesson plan, and then you've worked through one example together, that perhaps the finished graphic organizer on their own in the you do portion of your lesson plan is sufficient informal assessment to let you know that the student has understood the lesson itself, the strategy itself. So that completed graphic organizer is a sufficient assessment. Or maybe you're going to use your kid watching skills and are doing I can statements at the end of your lesson, and you have the student articulate back to you what it is that they've learned. And then you know informally that they have understood the point of your lesson. The next section is the accommodation section. This is where you are going to pretend that you are teaching to a whole class. And if you were to take this lesson plan that you're teaching with your tutee, if this lesson plan were to be taught to an entire classroom, you're going to pretend that you have students with exceptionalities in your classroom. And I want you to choose 2 exceptionalities. Examples of exceptionalities are gifted, slow learner, ELL, a student has learning disability, a student who is hard of hearing or deaf, a student has a visual impairment. If you are a special ed major, you are certainly welcome for a student with a learning disability to get very specific as to your area of interest. But elementary education majors, obviously that is not our area of expertise, and you can stick to other examples of exceptionalities. I highly recommend ELL because we are certainly going to have students who have English as a second language in our future classrooms, and how we would address accommodating them is important to start thinking about. I would like for you to stick with these same 2 exceptionalities for every single lesson plan that you write for the rest of the semester, because you get to get your head in the idea of, okay, if I had these 2 exceptionalities in my classroom, how would I continue to accommodate them? The next section is closure. I don't want you to see you in your lessons just saying, oh, time's up, okay, good to see you today, have a good weekend or whatever, and goodbye. It's always important to wrap up, to summarize what it is you've done that day. Really good idea that could be addressing your students' affective needs is to have them write an I can statement, and then they are articulating back to you what it is that they have learned, or what they can do. But how are you going to wrap up the lesson? Always summarize. Review. What did we do today? Perhaps get out your agenda that you set for the lesson on your whiteboard and say, okay, here, this is what we set out to do. Were we able to successfully do it? Possible problems. I want you to just consider just one possible problem and then how you would solve that problem that could come up during your lesson. The next section is the materials checklist. Just please list all materials that you are going to need to have this lesson go off successfully. So any materials in your tutoring kit, as well as items that you plan to put in your Today folder. The next section is the references section. So where did you get your idea for your lesson? Was it from a website? Was it from a friend? Is your mom a teacher and you got the idea from her? Did you think up the idea for yourself? Did you get it from a teacher help book? Wherever you got the idea, do not worry about putting it in APA style. Just let me know where you got the lesson plan idea. And the last section of the lesson plan is insights into text. It is important for you to understand that you should plan to use literature to teach literacy, reading and writing, and that it's important to think through which pieces of literature are the best to address specific strategies. So that's what you're doing in this section, is you're saying that this particular book that I chose for this lesson was the best for this strategy because, and I want a good hefty paragraph. Now, if you don't have a book that goes with your lesson, perhaps you're referencing a book from the previous lesson, that's fine too, but you need to address that particular book in this section. The lesson that I will observe must have a piece of literature connected with it, because in your graded PBA teaching cycle assignment, you will be given 10% of your grade based on just this section alone. Good luck writing your lesson plans and happy teaching!